Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, lead content strategist for the Monday Morning Quarterback. He joins us. What do you make of that story that Mac Jones was going to be available for us today, and then we were told he can't? He's talking to a bunch of teams.
I think the Niners have him right where they want him. Kyle's been reluctant to share information with even people in the building. I mean, I can tell you that for a fact, Dan. And part of, his process, and I think this is smart, when they went through January and February and Kyle assigned out 5 coaches and a bunch of scouts to look at the 5 first-round quarterbacks, was that Kyle didn't share his opinion on the quarterbacks with any of those guys, because he didn't want them to be affected by what his opinion was, like that they would think, okay, I got to think like Kyle, so I'm just going to agree with whatever he thinks. So, Kyle's kept his cards close to the vest through this process. And, I can tell you that at both Ohio State and North Dakota State, for those second pro days for Justin Fields and Trey Lance, the Niners had a good amount of control, to the point where their quarterbacks coach, Rich Scangarillo, was running the latter part of both of those workouts. And so, I think Mac Jones is the leader in the clubhouse when they made the trade on March 29th. But, part of the process for them was, let's see, going through a full process, if either of the other two, who are more physically talented, can catch up to him. And, the fact that they have Mac Jones in the dark now, 3 days out, doesn't really surprise me because of the way they've handled this whole process.
But do you think they made that deal initially a month ago without knowing who they were going to take at the number 3 pick overall?
Well, I think Kyle had an idea of what he was going to do at the time. Whether enough has happened since then to move him off of that, I don't know. And I can't tell you for sure that it was Mac Jones. I'm just reading tea leaves and what other people who know this stuff really well, think, that I've talked to over the course of the last month. So do I think he had a strong idea of what he wanted to do when they made the trade? Yeah, I think Kyle had a strong idea of what he wanted to do. But again, I've got pretty good evidence that he hasn't shared it with a lot of people. And he wanted to have an open, real process. And when John Lynch pulled that trade off, when they make the deal with Chris Greer and the Miami Dolphins to go and get the 3rd pick, I know part of the logic for them was, we want to be able to do everything out in the open. We want to be able to set up a second pro day for Trey Lance, set up a second pro day for Justin Fields, and go through all the Zoom meetings and all the different, machinations that you go through with any prospect without having to hide our intentions. And so, I sort of look at this, Dan, as they knew they were taking. Would it be worth going through all of this when everybody has a pretty good idea of who the first 2 quarterbacks to go are going to be?
Well, the only thing, and I'll go back to what a source told me when they made this deal, and that was that Kyle liked Mac Jones. Someone or someones in their draft room, in the organization, were trying to convince them of Trey Lance. So here we are a month later, and that information has resurfaced as if it's new information, and it's not.
Yeah, and Trey Lance, I'll tell you this, Dan, I mean, I make phone calls in the summer to kind of try to figure out who the next set of quarterbacks are going to be, because at that point, a lot of teams have gone through, all right, our initial draft meetings, here are players we have to watch. And when I did that with Trey Lance last summer, and this is before we had any idea they were going to move off of Jimmy Garoppolo, trade up, any of that, more than one team pointed out to me, he's an ideal scheme fit for Kyle Shanahan. Now, there's a lot you got to wrap your head around with Trey Lance. I would argue that the difference in competition between North Dakota State and the teams they play might be larger than the difference in competition between Alabama and the teams they play. They beat the crap out of everybody. You know what I mean? So Trey Lance wasn't in a lot of critical situations. He wasn't playing from behind a lot. He didn't throw the ball a lot. You didn't see him in a lot of the situations you want to see him, coming into the NFL. So, I think part of this for the Niners is, here in Mac Jones, we see somebody who's shown us a lot of what we want to see. And then over here, we've got Trey Lance, who's a really good schematic fit for what we want to do and can bring a lot of things to the table that'll really open up Kyle Shanahan's offense. We need to decide if we can get him there with the other stuff. And to Trey Lance's credit, my understanding is, he's come across as very, very football smart in all of his meetings, which I know is going to appeal to Kyle Shanahan and the Niners.
Talking to Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter, and of course works for the Monday Morning Quarterback. Trying to handicap all of this, and with these quarterbacks, and I always say, my logic philosophy is get your quarterback, not a quarterback. And a lot of times these GMs will say, we got to get a quarterback, not your quarterback. If I said you had to bet on one of these not working out in the NFL, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, who would you pick?
I think Trey Lance is the iffiest, just because I think it's the biggest projection, and the hit could be really big too. So if you hit on him, and I think the best comp for him is Josh Allen. That's the one I hear over and over and over again. Trevor Lawrence is a generational prospect. I think he's separate from the group. I mean, Zach Wilson, I think the majority of teams have him number 2, but I've talked to some teams that have Justin Fields number 2. So,
Zach Wilson, I don't know about Zach Wilson.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that he had a very good year, and he can roll left and throw right at a pro day and throw it 50 yards, but I don't know. And he's going to the Jets. I mean, how this winning and losing is systemic, and I wonder about that when you put him in a situation like that. Trey Lance could end up going to, a good team.
Look, so much of this is situational, right, Dan?
Yes.
I mean, if you want to bet on, Zach Wilson with the Jets or Trey Lance with the Niners, regardless of who they are as players, who are you betting on?
I'm betting on Trey Lance.
Because he's going to be throwing to Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle.
Yes.
And he's got Trent Williams blocking for him, and he has the best running game in the league and a really, really good defense, and they don't have to ask the world of him.
Other than that.
But so much of this is situational. There's so few quarterbacks, I think, that come into the league. And Andrew Luck, I think, is a good example of it. But there's so few quarterbacks that come into the league that can actually overcome bad circumstances when they're young players. We talk about Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not saying Patrick wouldn't have made it otherwise, but look at his situation. He was dropped into a team that was, had a coach who'd been building there for 5 years, a guy who is one of the best play callers and quarterback developers of our generation, right? And Andy Reid, throwing to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. He's got Pro Bowl level tackles and Eric Fisher and Mitch Schwartz. He comes into the league, a kid he gets drafted with, and Kareem Hunt wins the rushing title. I mean, I think sometimes we look at the quarterbacks and we say, this guy's going to be counted on to change everything for this franchise, when really whether or not they make it rides a whole lot more on what situation they're being dropped into.
I said earlier, if Mahomes goes to the Jets, he's a curiosity. We go, boy, that guy looks like he has talent, but they're not a very good team. Or if he was in Jacksonville, to start, we would look at him as a curiosity. We wouldn't say he's the future of the sport. And I think he got into the right situation. And one or two of these quarterbacks are going to get in the right situation. If Justin Fields goes to New England, or, somebody goes to Atlanta here, they might be in a better situation than Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence. Speaking of Atlanta, this Julio Jones information is starting to sort of trickle out that maybe he's on the block. How up for grabs do you think is Julio Jones?
It depends on what the Falcons are offered.
But is he a second-round pick?
I think for a first-round pick, they'd move him, and I think they could agree to a deal this week. I know, logistically, they couldn't execute it until June 1st. I think if somebody came along with a first-round pick now, there's not a lot of precedent for a deal like that. You have to make sure, is Julio going to get hurt in the spring? There's stuff like that can happen. But it's not all that different than, the Lions and the Rams agreeing to the Matthew Stafford deal in January and then executing it in March, right?
But do you trade Julio Jones if you're going to take Kyle Pitts?
I think my guess right now would be the Falcons are going to take Kyle Pitts. And I think if they had their druthers, they would keep Julio Jones and throw Kyle Pitts into an offense with Julio and Calvin Ridley and 3 first-round picks in the offensive line.
Yeah.
And Matt Ryan, who we're talking about Matt Ryan like he's 45 years old. He's still just 35. He's got a few good years left. But their cap situation is it's such a mess, Dan, that they have to do something. As of today, right now, they don't have enough room to sign their draft class. And they've already mortgaged contracts for Matt Ryan, for Jake Matthews, and for Deion Jones. And so something's got to give here. And I mean, for Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith, the new guys in charge, they're really a big piece of this is balancing mortgaging another contract. And Julio's contract's a big one, mortgaging another contract versus maybe just getting that contract off the books and then getting another player in either this year or next year who's going to be cost controlled for the next 4 years, which can really help you from a cap standpoint.
People try to tell you what the Patriots might be doing or could be doing, and it's all speculation because they never let any information out. But you're Boston-based. Do you have any idea what Bill Belichick is capable of doing in the first round?
So, like, they've explored. They've made the exploratory phone calls about going up into the top 10. And, I know they've talked to Atlanta. They've talked to Carolina. And look, like, I don't want to make that big a deal out of that because these things happen this time of year, and I don't think they're down the road with any of those teams quite yet, at least to my knowledge. But I do think they're in sort of a similar spot to where they were in 2012. And if you remember, they made it to the Super Bowl in 11, but their defense was it was a mess. And that was the year, if you remember, they had Gronkowski and Hernandez, and I think Brady either won the MVP or had an MVP type of season. But they were playing Julian Edelman on defense, And so if you go back and you look at that year, then everybody's Bill trades down. He traded up twice that year. Traded up for Dante Hightower and traded up for Chandler Jones to try and fix their defense. Both those guys were hits. A couple of years later, the defense is completely fixed. So I think, if you look at the quarterback position, I'd sort of line it up like that. Now, like, how do they value Justin Fields? I don't know if they value him enough to make the sort of move that it would take to go up to 4 to get him. But if he starts to slide into that 7, 8, 9 range, now I think we might be talking about something. So, I like where I think the rubber could hit the road there. They've got relationships with Miami, obviously, at number 6. I think if Pitts and Chase are off the board, Miami might consider moving down. They've got, obviously Detroit's there, and Matt Patricia's in the building in New England. He knows the Detroit people. The Lions are looking to trade down. And then Carolina has a director of player personnel in Pat Stewart, who used to work in New England, who has all kinds of relationships in the Patriots building. So I look at that sort of alley of picks there in 6, 7, 8, where if a quarterback they like, and I think they've got some interest in Fields, were to fall in that range, maybe they might look at the idea of going up.
Do you want to get in on our Julian Edelman bet?
Sure.
Paulie, give Albert the bet.
Albert, since you're a Boston guy, you'll like this. I made the bet that Julian Edelman will attempt to play professional football for the Buccaneers next year instead of just going flat retirement. Attempt to.
And its stake is a pie to the face.
The stakes. Oh, so I got to take a pie to the face if I'm wrong.
Well, you want to be in with Paulie and say that Edelman will at least attempt to play for the Buccaneers?
I'm going to say he won't.
Okay. All right.
His knee's bone on bone, guys. I don't know.
I can't see it.
Who knows? I mean, maybe he decides with 6 games left he wants to do it. And I know he's got aspirations in Hollywood and everything else, and maybe those don't work out. And he decides I got to go be a football player again. I don't know. I'm not counting on it.
But is Gronk playing this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was the one for me. So like Dan, like you're right, like because I look back, like I was in the Super Bowl standing next to Rob Gronkowski after the Patriots beat the Rams. I was standing next to Rob Gronkowski in that locker room after the Super Bowl, and I was convinced he was done, and he retired shortly thereafter. And I thought, this guy's just had it with football, and a year later he's coming back. So I guess anything's possible.
Enjoy this week, Albert. Always appreciate you joining us, and thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Dan.